Most stories about heroes begin with destiny. This one begins with a mistake. Welcome to another episode of the Most Serious Podcast. And today we're doing a solo episode after a very long time. I think last time we did a solo episode on Benjamin Franklin and his 13 virtues. This time I came across another legend of sorts, a very important figure in historical and mythological texts, whose name is pretty familiar. He's Hercules. And his story is not just about another hero arc. It has a human element to it. It has his own redemption to it. And we'll follow the same template as we usually do, which is I'll read through a script and I'll give off my commentary across it. The script I generated by using some LM models and doing a quick research on Hercules and his story. I think this topic about Hercules also spoke to me because how an individual struggles to find their identity. And it's not so much about the mental exercises that you do, but rather the physical actions that you take in the real world that carve out a sense of identity or the sense of meaning from life. So we'll begin. I've divided the script into 7 to 8 small chapters. We'll go through each and uncover what Hercules was all about and what does his story teach us. Hercules was born because Zeus, the king of gods, couldn't stay faithful. His affair with a mortal woman resulted in a child caught between worlds, too strong to be ordinary, too flawed to be divine. And from this moment, he entered the world. Someone wanted him gone. Not a monster, not a rival, but Hera, Zeus's wife. Her anger became the shadow Hercules would spend his life walking through. So, this is episode 90 of the Most Serious Podcast, Hercules, Strength, Consequence, and Redemption. Let's begin with the origin story of Hercules, which is chapter 1. Hercules, originally named Hercules, was born in Thebes. So, most of the pronunciation in this script I could be very off because I am not very good and well read on mythology or texts or the way most words are pronounced. So, yeah, excuse me if I make mistakes in the correct pronunciation. The origin of Hercules was his father was Zeus, his mother, Alcmene, was human. From infancy, he wasn't treated as a child. He was treated as evidence. Evidence of Zeus's infidelity. Evidence Hera refused to ignore. This is a segue on thinking that we like mortals also think so much about morals and following the right path. Here it is like evident that Zeus was caught in infidelity being a god. And another factor is that Hera, his wife, refused to ignore that. So, human emotion, I know we say it human, but emotion is still very prominent in actions that even mythological gods took. According to myth, when he was still in his crib, Hera sent 2 serpents to kill him. Instead of crying, Hercules reached out and strangled them. It wasn't a heroic moment, it was a foreshadowing. Strength would always show up before judgment. Power would always act faster than thought. And the world noticed. The sentence, power would always act faster than thought, sparks like a conversation in my head, which is something that we experience in real life as well. People in position of power sometimes, and obviously it doesn't apply to everyone, but they tend to act faster, or maybe some people in power get corrupt by the nature of power, that actions without like a proper consistent thoughtful process being done behind it, those actions sometimes end up doing more bad than good, even though the intent behind them might be something else. So I think power has a very interesting way to corrupt people, and I love the Batman and Joker dynamic in this as well. And I'm a huge Batman fan. That Joker's whole philosophy or idea of a victory over Batman is to corrupt him, is to break Batman or make Batman break his moral code of not killing another person. So yeah, I think power dynamics are really interesting, and they've always been the core of human behavior. I think not just human, as we can read, it applies to gods as well. Moving on to chapter 2, which is talent without control. As Hercules grew, his reputation spread. He was strong, brave, capable of feats other men wouldn't attempt. But alongside skill came something less impressive: a short temper, impulsiveness, and the inability to fully control his own strength. You could call it immaturity or you could call it inevitability, because strength without guidance rarely creates peace. This line again speaks volumes on how power can be abused or power can be mismanaged and it ends up resulting in so much harm that potentially was not even preceded or expected. There needs to be a maneuver to power, there needs to be a direction or a guidance to it. Back to Hercules. So he gets all his skills, his strength, but his temper is the con in it. His impulsiveness, his inability to control his temper is his Achilles heel. Still, his life looked promising. He married, he had children. For a short time, he lived as a man, not as a myth. But Hera hadn't forgotten him. One day, she didn't send monsters, she sent madness. In that state, Hercules killed his wife and children, believing they were enemies. Wow. When the madness faded, reality didn't. The greatest thing he would ever attempt was not a battle, it was redemption. I don't know, when I think about this scene of Hera sending madness. Madness on its own again comes back to the core point that we talked about in the beginning of the episode, which is that action before thought is sometimes and more often than not a consequence of getting power or getting a sense of a overwhelmed sense of action, a overwhelmed sense of ability. I think that leads to sometimes doing things that people end up regretting. We move on to chapter 3, where Hercules goes to the oracle and receives his sentence. To atone, Hercules sought guidance from the oracle of Delphi. The message was simple and brutal: serve King Eurystheus, perform the tasks he commands. These tasks became as the 12 labors, a challenge the challenges intended not to test him, but to break him. Ironically, the labors did the opposite. They shaped him, which is also very true for most of our lives. If you look back in retrospect, I think many a times people, or in general, you would have faced challenges that now in retrospect look like learning blocks or look like stepping stones. But in that moment, they're probably, senses or overwhelmed sense of emotion where you feel that you're not equipped or not ready to achieve them. But they end up carving out or making you grow in certain areas, or maybe get you a set of experience that will be useful to encounter something similar in the future. And I really like this African quote which goes, "For a man doesn't enter the same river twice. He's not the same man and it's not the same river." So I think everything that you go through in life and how it goes, like what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I think that really applies to Hercules as well. So we move on to chapter 4, which is the 12 labors. Each labor is remembered as a feat of brute force, but the truth is more nuanced. They show the evolution of a man learning restraint, strategy, and eventually humility. The first labor was the Neiman's lion, a beast with impenetrable skin. No weapon could harm it, so Hercules used the simple solution: his bare hands. The second labor was the Lernaean hydra. When you cut off a head, two heads grow back. When you cut off a head, two heads grew back. Strength didn't solve it, planning did. He cauterized the necks so that it wouldn't regenerate. The third labor was the Cernian hind, a sacred deer he had to capture without harm. Hercules spent over an year trying to do this, and for once he learned that patience mattered more than force. The fourth labor being the Arymanthian boar. Again, I might be pronouncing these names slightly off, so please forgive me for that. The fourth labor was the Amanthian boar, a lesson in persistence. He drove it deep into the snow and captured it alive. The fifth labor was the Augean stables, decades of filth. Instead of scrubbing those stables, he redirected rivers, an engineering solution disguised as a chore. The sixth labor was the Stymphalian birds, monstrous birds with bronze feathers. He used noise to flush them out, where he learned that adaptation could also lead to solutions instead of muscle. The seventh labor was the Cretan bull, captured and subdued, a reminder that not every enemy is personal. The eighth labor was the mares of Diomedes, flesh-eating horses. He fed their master to them, violence neutralizing violence. The ninth labor was the belt of Hippolyta. Originally a diplomatic exchange, Hera interfered, violence returned. The tenth battle being the cattle of Geryon, guarded by a giant. Hercules completed it through his endurance. The penultimate battle, the Hesperides, obtained with help, proof that even heroes need others. And the final labor of Hercules was the Cerberus, the guardian of the underworld. He captured it without weapons, not through dominance, but respect for boundaries of life and death. These 12 labors, I think, have on them own, like each labor could be an episode on its own, but I think they contain quintessential wisdom which is relevant across time. Because the story of Hercules, even though in our modern world and across these labors as I was reading them, kind of reminds you of something similar that you might have experienced in your own personal life and something that you can take away that might apply to your life. So when the labors were finished, Hercules wasn't just strong, he was disciplined. Not perfect, but changed. We move on to chapter 5, which is an attempt at the ordinary life. After the labors, Hercules tried something unfamiliar, a normal life. He married a woman, Deianira. Their relationship represented something rare, a version of Hercules not to be defined by violence or tasks, but by companionship. For a time, it worked, but myths rarely allow heroes calm endings. One day while traveling, Hercules and Deianira needed to cross a river. A centaur named Nessus offered to help. Halfway across, he attempted to assault her. Hercules reacted instantly, shooting him with an arrow tipped in Hydra's poison. As Nessus was dying, he played his final move, which was manipulation. He told Deianira his blood could act as a love charm, something to use if Hercules ever strayed. She believed him, she kept the blood, and she waited. Chapter 6: Love, Fear, and the Final Mistake. Years later, Hercules became close to another woman, Iole. To Deianira, this wasn't politics. It wasn't mythology, it was loss. She used the blood, she soaked a cloak in it, and sent it to Hercules, hoping to keep his love. It didn't restore anything, rather destroyed everything. When Hercules put on the cloak, the poison activated with heat, it burned into his skin. His muscles fused to the fabric. No strength, no weapon, no resistance could stop it. His greatest enemy wasn't a monster. It was unintended consequence, human fear, love mixed with insecurity. This brings us to the chapter 7, which is the end of Hercules. In unbearable pain, Hercules made his final choice. He built a funeral pyre. He lay upon it, not as punishment, but as acceptance. When the fire consumed his mortal form, Zeus intervened, not as a father making up for a failure, but as someone acknowledging transformation. Hercules' mortal suffering ended. His divine nature ascended. He became immortal. The bitterness between Hera and Hercules ended as well. Myth says she even eventually accepted him. Whether that was forgiveness or resignation, I'll leave that up to you. I think the legacy of Hercules takes a different place in history than other mythological gods or identities that we talk about. His place in history isn't defined by perfection. It's rather defined by contradiction. A hero who caused harm, a strong man destroyed by emotion, someone who spent his life correcting damage, oftentimes which was his own, a figure who demonstrates that power without discipline is chaos, and discipline without meaning becomes burden. His story remains relevant because it reflects a simple truth. Strength isn't the absence of weakness. It's the ongoing work of returning to yourself after you fail, which is also similar to one of my favorite dialogues in the Batman trilogy. It's an exchange between Bruce Wayne and Alfred, where Wayne is recovering from an injury or Wayne is recovering from an accident, and Alfred asks him, "Why do we fall, Master Wayne?" And he tells him that we fall to learn to get up again and fight again or to rise again. So strength isn't a mere, absence of not being weak, but it's making that choice of trying again, of getting up again, and iteratively trying to get from point A to point B, even though your plan of action or your anticipation of what might happen doesn't go as planned. Well, this was episode 90, all about Hercules. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this.